Hello and welcome to another episode of the Transfer Podcast on the YouTube of Anfield Index and Anfield Index Pro. And I'm Trev Downey, and that is Dave Davis. And we are here today to talk about even more stories that just won't stop. We thought we'd have a few days break and we'd come back to you giving it a full week. But no, we had two last week. And here we are, the first opportunity in the next week. And there's more stories, Dave. And it's exciting in one way, a little bit unnerving in another. Obviously, the big one we should start there is the Van Dijk news that most people have now accepted and taken in. But I think there was a little bit of a playful interaction between Virgil and an interviewer about when this might happen. And it seems, doesn't it, like it might be Friday now. There are quite a few hints going around. And when you told me or suggested to me, here, look at this, someone saying Friday, I think my reaction was, well, that's good business by Liverpool, spread it out to the maximum, have 2 weekends of celebration, have another good feel-good buzz going into the weekend's fixture. Makes a lot of sense.
It does. It absolutely does. I mean, after the game, there's the interview, isn't there, with Salah and Van Dijk, and there's the playful jibes, and they're laughing at, and we're all like, yeah, we all know this is done. Just like, when's it going to be? And he says, I know, that famous Virgil line, I know, but I don't know. It's like, yeah, he knows fully what's happening and when it's all getting released. And then, as you said, there's the line coming out, and it's an interesting one that Jan Fjortov tweeted. It seems like there's going to be more great news at Liverpool. Got a feeling it will be a good Friday for all their fans. And even David Lynch, who we had on Media Matters earlier, said his info, it's going to be this week. That seems to be unanimous, which, if you think about it, Trev, you start eliminating the days. I mean, it's not going to be tomorrow because that's the Hillsborough anniversary. So quite rightly, that will be the full focus there. So the days start to move on. You think Salah's released on the Friday morning. Arneslot has a press conference on Friday morning. Why not just rinse, repeat in that regard? And we shouldn't just brush it off because this is brilliant news again. We said Salah was brilliant news. This is brilliant news. To have the two main men tied down, the elite players, the two player of the year contenders really as well. This just feels like, obviously, if this is true, but all the info is it's going to be sometime this week, a massive positive.
Speaking of massive positives, we have a group of fans who have a unique capacity for turning any positive stuff like that into anxiety or worry or fear or negativity. And one of the first things I noticed straight away was people saying, well, now the money is going to be going to Virgil and to Mo, and there'll be no new signings. And, there's always people who are going to be unhappy. It's a remarkable perspective. And it's one that's not just like a couple of lone nuts. It's quite a few people who, we like them in a way. We're fond of these types who enjoy transfers more than football because there are people in a way for this show.
Yeah.
But, we do try to walk the line. You and I are football fans first and transfer gossip mongers second. And it's hard to understand that perspective. We're going to come on to it later on, but there was a well-known journalist as well who was kind of expressing a similar view that, we've got these two guys nailed down. I'm not sure if you gave us a detail there, but I think you mentioned to me earlier on, we're looking at a bump in pay for Virgil. And I'm not sure if we're looking at something like that for Mo, or if he's happy to be the highest earner for another 2 years, or how that works. Are there any details coming out around that? Because this is the kind of thing, like I said, is driving people to anxiety.
Yeah, it was because there was a lot of speculation at first when it was coming around that Mo Salah was going to have to take a wage cut, wasn't he, to stay? And that's been quickly dispelled. Like, no, it's a small bump in that regard. That's the info we've got. And then it was, you're right to mention it, Trevor. It was just like a line in the Paul Joyce article about Mo Salah, but saying when Virgil van Dijk is set to sign, that there's no doubt he's set to become the best paid centre half in world football. So that's obviously going to be a wage bump as well, isn't it? And you're right. I saw some people like on the verge of losing their minds a little bit, like that's the summer budget gone. Why are we supposed? It's Virgil van Dijk. It is the best centre half in world football. So if he's paid as the best centre-half in world football, how many times are we saying this line in the last few shows? It's not our money. He's one of our best players. He's not going to play for like slushies and moon pies, is he, in the nicest way? Like, he also, as we've said before, has turned down massive wages from PSG, Saudi and all. Of course, there's going to be a decent contract on offer for him. He's the best centre-half in the world. I don't know why people look for sort of the elements of dismalness in the joy a little bit, but I get wages and budgets come in, but people, it's Virgil van Dijk. He's going to stay. Let's be happy.
Yeah, you're right, and it's an important thing to say. That point, like take a beat and actually do enjoy it, because taking it for granted is about the same as the people who are going to take the league win for granted and start grumbling about how the quadruple was missed and what are we going to do next year. Smell the roses, I think, is what you're suggesting, and I agree with you entirely. So we obviously had to start there because it's the most certain, as you said, that really coy. Well, I know, but I don't know from Virgil means it's going to happen soon, and betting men would put their money on Friday. But most people are listening to us and watching us this evening because they want to hear about the new players we're being linked with and the current players that are being linked with exits. And in the centre half department and defence in general, we surely are going to be busy. Dave, we saw a game, and we can't ignore it, where Andy Roberts came on, had a horror cameo after having a horror match previous to that. Nobody could really see what Tsimikas had done wrong to be taken off, and minutes management for a lad like Tsimikas makes no sense. Connor Bradley, I thought, was making us look quite structured at right back. Again, tinkering occurred there, and we put a centre half out there, and that didn't work out particularly well. And we already know that there were rumours around not just Virgil, which have been put to bed, but our other, rock at the heart of the defence there, Ibu Konate. And we know that our third in line, theoretically, Joe Gomez, the kind of utility man, is highly likely to be on his bike this summer. So there's a whole lot going on. And yet all I'm hearing is maybe one name on the regular, two names on the regular for all of those positions across the back. Talk us through what you know about the defence, the ones we're being linked to, and the ones that we're feeling maybe on their bike.
Yeah, I mean, Dean Huijsen is the place to start. There's no surprise there, is there at all? Link. David Ornstein mentioned him again in his Q&A. He had that exclusive out as well. The big thing around digging for this one is, Liverpool absolutely like Huijsen, maybe more than people think. Because I think when people think Huijsen, first of all, they'll think that's the good third choice to come in, build him up and go from there, which I get. Liverpool highly rate this kid. Now, a couple of things to say on this. The Ornstein line in the article here, which I think is worth just calling out, around Liverpool and Dean Huijsen and Konate, saying maybe their consideration is influenced by the lack of development so far on Ibu Konate's contract, which we'll come to. And you can imagine Huijsen would have a good chance of starting alongside Virgil van Dijk if he was signed. Now, people are going to have mixed views on that a little bit, Trev, because the ceiling for this kid's massive. There's a reason why all the big clubs want him, no doubt about that. But where he is right now against where Ibu is right now, Ibu, who's played in a World Cup final, Ibu, who's played in the Champions League final and been, man of the match for us, set to win a league and all, there's still a gap there, isn't there, in this regard? But on this, two big things that we've been able to dig out. Liverpool have proper got in for Huijsen, seriously, made their pitch, gone in. Virgil van Dijk's had the phone call with him. The lot is our info, Trev. They are really trying hard to bring this kid. They think the ceiling with this kid is massive. The side is, when you look at that line of Ornstein's, what is it at? Where are his minutes? Is he looking at a starter? All these types of things it raises. It kind of comes back to Ibu a little bit as well. And the big thing that we're getting with Ibu is Liverpool are trying to negotiate him. They want him to stay. Of course they do. But with all the wage increases at the moment, I mean, they kind of got handed a bit of a poison chalice, didn't they? Richard Hughes, Julian Ward, and all these. And you've done the wage bump for Van Dijk. You've done the wage bump for Salah. You've now got Bradley wanting a wage bump, a Curtis Jones wanting a wage bump. The talks, as you've seen the figures as well, Ibu wants a big wage bump, doesn't he? Like, there's that. So Liverpool obviously want to keep them, but it's got to be in line with everything. And the big thing that a lot of people are talking about, a lot of journalists are just wondering, which I get, is where is the line drawn eventually? You know, if they set an absolute ceiling, and Canate is well liked by a number of clubs we know, like Real, PSG, especially. He's got a year left to go in the summer, Trev. It's quite clear Liverpool have either got to renew or sell. There's no running down of Ibu Kanate for a free. It just cannot happen. Simple as that. So he's either got to, I don't know how you put it, get on board with the structure, what they're wanting. Yes, of course, there's going to be a wage bump. But I say this with a bit of balance. I love Ibu. I think he's got some great attributes. He's not Van Dijk, though, is he? At the same time, and you do wonder where they see him in the actual, like, how much this has to be done, where they'll bend the line to, like they have for Salah and Van Dijk ultimately. And the other name, we've mentioned it before, we're hearing is Mark Gay's the other one they're really looking at, but Huijsen is the one they've gone big on. My only worry on this is they're different centre halves, aren't they? Ibu is a behemoth, brilliant in the air, absolute powerhouse, quick. Maybe not the best on the ball, but got better. Like, he's got his strengths, no doubt about it. Those are the two centre halves, maybe better on the ball. Gay, you know, a better ball player. Gay, Huijsen, definitely a better ball player. You see it as progressive stats, but they're not the giant behemoths we're used to at the back, aren't we? Like a Joel Matip even as the alternate. But maybe, and this is what we've said, and you, to be fair, it was your line last week, and I think it's right. We don't know what an Arne Slot centre-half is yet, do we? Because he's inherited these. So maybe actually Huijsen, ball player, a Gay, better ball player, is more of an Arne Slot that he'll sacrifice that aerial ability. But this is almost a strange thing to say because it's the transfer show. I don't want Huijsen and Gay to be coming in because that would mean they've not been able to do a deal with Kanate and they're shipping him out.
Yeah, and how much store do you place by the numbers that are going around with the Kanate thing? Because unless I'm miscalculating, what he's reportedly asking for is not a bump. It's 150% to go from 80 to 200,000.
Yeah.
That's, you know, on the back of having done deals for our two, you know, superstars, increasingly unlikely. And again, we might just be getting fed a line of crap on that, but those figures were very much out there.
Yeah. There's those figures, and a lot of speculation, but the things you know in this whole situation is we know Huijsen's release clause, and Paul Joyce, David Ornstein and others have written about the Ibu Kanate wage demands. As you said there, we've seen it in print, 200 grand a week from 80. That's bump's probably me underselling it a little bit, isn't it? It's a huge jump and it's a massive change to the structure. Again, I just wonder, where does that line bend and where does it break? And as a few have put there in the chat panel, it's well known PSG and others are looking at Ibu. But all we've got is Liverpool will not let Ibu go on a free. So it's either they want to do this deal, they want him to stay, and hopefully his big brother Virgil just puts his arm around the shoulder and, you know, like, come on, we want you here. Like, let's get this done. But my only worry is, as much as we celebrate transfers, I don't want Huijsen and Gay, as it's probably bad news in terms of a departure.
Do you think in the best possible situation, we get Joe Gomez fit and in a very cynical way, cash in on the asset that is Joe Gomez and find ourselves bringing in a project at centre-half and holding on to Kwanzaa, and that then becomes your four? Does that seem like a likely thing to you?
it makes sense a little bit, and I think about that. And the reason I say a little bit, it makes sense as an argument, a bit like you said at the start. If you take away Huijsen and you take away Gay, the only other one that's really been mentioned, as we've said before, is that Schlotterbeck. Now, he's got a knee injury again and he's out for the season. So you're thinking, that's probably a big red line through that one. We ain't hearing a lot of centre-half names. And just my thoughts were a little bit with the talk of homegrown that we've mentioned the other week. Well, Gay's English for a start, so that's a tick in the box. And Huijsen's under 21, isn't he? So that's a tick in the box as well. So there's always a name that can break. So it's possible. But it's back to that line you said. There's just not many more names out there at the moment.
No. So again, it's so unpredictable. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes a bad thing. I do want to get into other names that we're being linked with. And I know you're going to really enjoy this next story because he's one of your favorite footballers in the world, which is a slow dawning revelation to me. But we are being linked this week, and you've put in the title, and someone's already quizzing you up on whether or not it's relevant, because the player, Xavi Simons, has recently made a move from PSG for a big transfer fee. And yet he is the one, outside of some of the ones that you've mentioned there, he is the one that has been mentioned again and again and again with Liverpool. And it's very interesting. It won't go away. And you've got as well an under-the-radar winger for us from Spain. So talk to us about both of these, starting with Xavi Simons and why he's just not your favorite player.
To be honest, I've been reluctant to dig on this because, when you don't want to discover something potentially that you don't want to hear. So I've tried to stay away from digging, but it's become a name recently that you just can't stay away from because it's been mentioned a lot. So you've got to, we do what we do and asking around. The big thing with this is most journalists are in on this. David Ornstein's mentioned it with the link before to Liverpool. We did Media Matters earlier with David Lynch, and he was like, yeah, his info, absolutely, Liverpool are having a good look at this player. So those are two parts to mention. The PSG, I've seen people mentioning this. They've only just signed him. We mentioned this last summer. They signed him on a 2.5-year deal, which was the strangest thing ever. Basically, they were fattening up the pig for Christmas, weren't they, Red Bull? They knew exactly what they were doing. He's got 2 years left to go. The sale's happening, whether it's Liverpool or someone else. That's pretty unanimous across all journalists. It was a fattening him up for this, basically. Now, I don't want the info that I'm getting. And in fact, I was just tempted when I read it just to switch my phone off a little bit. But the extra info we've got on this is Liverpool really like this player, Trev. Absolutely, from multiple sources. Not only this, I don't even like saying this. I feel dirty almost talking about this, but they like him in terms of the fact he could play the 10, the attacking midfielder. And Trev, which you're definitely not going to like, he's also played a good part of the season at left wing for Red Bull Leipzig as well, or on the left side. So he has that famous word, versatility. They really like that. Brilliant mates with Cody Gakpo, knows all the Dutch boys. Where's our manager from again? All the things we do not want to hear. And even the other bit that I got today, literally, which I know I shared with you and I don't really want to share wider, is they like the idea of he could play the 10 and you could then drop Szoboszlai potentially down to the 8, or you've got that midfield rotational options. Even though he's not the name, he's not the midfielder I want. He definitely isn't the left winger I want. He's not even close. But we've got to be honest. And this doesn't mean he's a terrible player. He's a Marmite player for me. But Xavi Simons and Liverpool is a red-hot, solid link from all the info we've got.
And so we can't ignore it. And, when you're hearing that name again and again from all these various people that you talk to, invariably there's something in it, Dave, and it's one of those ones that people are going to have to get their heads around. And I think, just glancing at the comments here, there are not too many people who disagree with you, and there are one or two who are piping up in his favor. So listen, it's an interesting one. I can't claim to be an expert on Xavi Simons at all. I've seen him a few times. I was really looking forward to seeing him because he was really hyped up to me by a pal of mine, and I watched the game and there was a massive amount of underwhelm. But that's one or two performances. I'm not a player judge, so it's interesting. However, there is a young Spanish lad that you wanted to mention here, which is a kind of an unusual link from Betis.
Sometimes when we get a name, as you know, our first question is like, who, what, where, followed by various other things. And it might just have broken my PC there to look at him. But Jesus Rodriguez, Betis youngster, left wing, right-footed, Spanish under-21 international. I'm going to be honest on this. He could walk past us in the street, Trev, couldn't he? And we'd have no idea who he is. I can't ever see or say I've seen him, know too much about him, bar what we've been told. But left winger, right-footed. Main attribute we've got, one-on-one duels, speed and progressing the ball that way. Really, really seen as a star at that level. The club have watched him quite a bit and are keeping a serious eye on him. I suppose the only thing which I'm struggling with a bit is if you look at what we've got now with Gakpo and Diaz. Yes, we suspect Diaz is going. I think, the world and his wife thinks Luis Diaz will depart this summer. The only question is, where does he fit in? And is he good enough to come in and, play in that senior team straight away? It just seems as though, and I might be wrong because I've never seen the kid and someone's going to tell me he's a world beater in the chat panel. The profile, put it this way, I think he's got 4 goals and 3 assists this season for Betis. He's played quite a few games at the Betis junior level as well before he stepped up, but he is light, but it would be its potential. I get it sounds like it's potential, but if Simons was underwhelming, I'm not sure what people would think if it was Jesus Rodriguez coming in to play on our left wing. Put it that way.
Yeah. I noticed somebody saying something about how we're very strong in the winger department, and we have re-signed our right winger. Maybe we've often talked about it with a view to him drifting central, but probably not immediately. But it is that left side that we're worried about, because whoever stole Cody Gakpo and left back, a lad that looks like Cody Gakpo, has done a real number on us in recent weeks. Since he's come back, he's been just a shadow of himself. And, fair enough. People do their own stories about how it takes time and so on and so forth. And Luis Diaz, whereas he's all bustle and hustle and huff and puff and very lively, for example, at the weekend there, got his goal. I think everybody knows it doesn't really matter whether you're really high on Luis Diaz or not. Luis Diaz will walk out the door to Barcelona tomorrow if they open it. Luis Diaz, if he doesn't get offered the contract that he wants at Liverpool, and that's an issue upcoming, will take the Saudi bag before, settling for less money at Liverpool. And why the hell wouldn't he? It's entirely up to him to do what he wants to do with his career. So I think that's why people are worried about the winger situation, especially on that left flank. We do, however, desperately need a striker. We saw the latest episode of Diogo Jota can't do Diogo Jota things at the weekend. We saw the other lad, Darwin Núñez, up in the stand, apparently sick, but grand, sitting in the ill. You dropped an absolute clanger in my head last week with the story about Darwin and Victor Osimhen, and how close that came on this show just last week. We were talking about that. So regardless, one of those two guys is going to go. I wouldn't be surprised if both of them go. And if that is the case, I only say that because I think people would still pay big money for Jota, and people would still pay big money for Núñez. Who those people are, that's for another show, a different time. But we are being linked with strikers because we're going to need a striker. And even if we kept the current strikers. We still need a striker because they're not doing striker things.
No.
And the one that you've got up for discussion this evening, we did the Victor Osimhen chat last week, and it was kind of exciting, and we went through his numbers, and they're really good. But this Ekitike guy is starting to seem like it might be a little bit more than Twitter talk. What's going on there?
Yeah, it was when we kind of mentioned him, we weren't discounting him, but it's fair to say that all the info we were getting, all the noise was from his agents. It was like, whenever there's usually agent talk, this isn't normally how Liverpool works. You wonder if it's just a smokescreen or trying to drum up the interest. But digging further on it, yeah, there's quite a few people saying Liverpool are having a real look, have spoken to his reps. And just at this moment in time, I mean, he scored. It was a weird game because he played against Spurs in midweek, didn't he, Thursday? And he scored the goal, a really good goal. So that's the best way to drive the headlines. And it was just surreal, Trev, because sometimes his link-up play was nice and he was quick. There was no doubts about that. But at times, he couldn't trap a bag of cement and he just couldn't pass it to a teammate. It was like, this is just Darwin Núñez Mark II a little bit as well, maybe being a bit harsh there. But again, plays for Frankfurt this weekend, again, gets a goal and assist. So his numbers are really ratcheting up that way. And you just honestly start to wonder a little bit of like, what names are out there? Who's realistic? Because we are starting to knock a few. I mean, Isaac, Newcastle look like they're going to get the Champions League, isn't it? So, you know, there's things you can start deleting. You see who's reasonable, who's capable of leading this line, who's got real potential or ability right now. And it's important to say as well, Liverpool aren't going to put a project number 9 in there. You don't have a project leading the line for the champions. That is not how it works. They've got to be of a certain caliber as well. This 22-year-old is, as it says there, lighting up the Bundesliga at the moment. There's a lot of rawness, but for the right price, it does feel a little bit like a Liverpool signing, doesn't it? And for all the players we've talked about and the things we want more pace in the line. This guy's rapid. And a lot of the people who say that we've talked to and really trying to dig this out, aside from the agent, are coming back and saying, yeah, Liverpool have got real interest in Ekitike. So we've got to tell you that. We'll see what it brings.
So, like, there's quite the array of names now. We've had some really high-profile ones. We have the ones that you and I would love to be talking about, but there's nothing new on them, including the likes of Victor Osimhen, Julian Alvarez, people like that we were linked with in the past. But the one that's there all the way through ticking along is Ekitike. So let's just see how that goes. Someone suggesting Delap along with Ekitike there in the comments. And by the way, folks, I can't help but just notice this when you're throwing out a name and saying, "Hey, come on," that kind of attitude. These aren't our ideas. These are the name. These are stories that Dave has got from various sources. We're not suggesting them. We're not putting them forward. If you wanted me and Dave to put forward our favorite players, that's a whole different show. That's a whole different show. And maybe we will do that at some point, but that's like not what we do here. What we do here is we go through what is in the news, what stories are out there, and present them to you. And if you don't like them, your dislikes should be directed at the sources, not us. However, we need to move on because we do have one more little bit of Liverpool stuff. And that is the whole, will it be a big summer? Won't it be a big summer? Now, we've already kind of touched on this a bit, Dave, with the whole reference to the Joyce, the bit in the Joyce article about, the wages and,
yeah.
I said to you then, I sent you a little screenshot of a quote from Jonathan Northcroft article where, again, that was the sentiment was, this money outlaid on the two big superstars will probably mean that it's not going to be a big summer. And all of us, Dave, I think, to a man and woman, are of the opinion that it needs to be a big summer, not because we're ungrateful that the likelihood is we're going to win the Premier League for only the second time in 30 years. 35 years. It's not about that. It's about the fact that a blind man can see you bring in a new manager. He is going to want to build that squad. So a little bit of this was going to happen anyway. And then you have the inevitable lads who are on their way out. Darwin Núñez will not be at the club next season. I would say Luis Diaz will not be. I say there's a high likelihood that one of our big defenders will not be, if not two. And this is what we're talking about with the big summer thing. So between that Northcroft thing, but I know Jonathan Northcroft the article was more along the lines of as well of like, well, look, moves could happen, but there will have to be exits. Now, we're kind of firmly of the belief, you and I, that exits are a real thing that will be likely to happen. And we know that Liverpool don't like to spend money that isn't earned coming in the other way, right? We're all aware of the frugality. So let's talk big summer. What's your take on the big summer? Should people be tempering their expectations? And if we don't see an exit of note or several exits of note, should we contain our excitement in terms of incomings? Is that what we're getting?
It's a really tough one to answer this without sounding like a politician and playing both sides of the game, isn't it? But there's always, for me, there's the first bit is like, someone's big will never be big enough for someone else, won't it? If we spend 200 million, we should have spent 300. There's always going to be those people. There's also the element of people, the net spend needs to be massive, or the net spend needs to be 200, 300 million. Now, at real risk of making myself unpopular, and not that that's a real concern anyway, but just in terms of net spend, I thought we wanted all these geeks back in and the relevant nerds and the smart people in the room. So don't you want the net spend to be like as low as or smart, whatever you want to call it, as possible? Don't we mock other clubs when they spend like 700 million and still can't win the league? So there's that element to it for me. But I actually think if it's not, Trev, if it's not a lot of action in and out, there's an argument we're being gaslit a bit here. Because let's just be clear, this is a quote from Virgil van Dijk that's been released today. I think they're planning to make it a big summer. So we all have to trust the board as a Liverpool connected fan to do the right job. That's Virgil van Dijk saying big summer. Yeah. Fabrizio Romano, who I don't hold in the same accord as Virgil van Dijk, let's say that, has also said it's going to be a big summer. David Ornstein on CBS says Liverpool will be very busy in the market. Those were his words this summer, and spell out the departures that you talked about quite rightly. And he mentioned Canate, Núñez, Gomez, Kwanzaa, Elliott and Diaz. So David Ornstein was putting 6 names up potentially, as well as naming incomings there. That's important to say. Arne Slot. And I wanted to dig these out, as I told you earlier, to make sure it's like, okay, let's just check we're not misquoting people or there's something. Said the other day, we're definitely working on strengthening in the summer. Now, he didn't say big, and obviously, people will interpret that, but we're definitely working on strengthening. All that combined with Virgil van Dijk's quote today, you could understand why people are expectant, can't you? Because if Van Dijk says it, Ornstein says it, Romano adds his snippet, Arne Slot mentions working on strengthening, has mentioned about that being the plan. We're hearing what we're hearing and all the various journos that are writing about it. It's right to have expectations, isn't it? It's also right, as you said, to put that context in. This is not Arne Slot's squad at all. There's quite a few players he clearly doesn't fancy and doesn't rate. We all know who they are. It's quite clear. We've seen the articles that the likes of Harvey Elliott for an offer is, we're open to offers for it and that type of situation. Darwin Núñez is gone. Luis Diaz likely. So you're right on all those things. So when you put that all together, that goes into the mix. Followed up by, I wondered when, I can't believe we've been doing this show for 34 minutes and that's the first slagging off of FSG we've had in the chat panel.
They've been skirting around it. They've been skirting around. He's the first guy to use the phrase FSG.
Where have you been, people? What time is it? Type of thing. But yeah, we're finally there. So the FSG element and all there and the way people see it goes into the mix. But for me, like you, with the amount of outgoings, Arne Slot's first summer, the new structure in place, the aging out of players as well, players that are not wanted realistically by the head coach, I don't see how it could be a small summer, if you want me to put it that way. What I'll have no idea about, and this is where I think people will just be speculating, is what's the net spend, Trev? Because someone may say, oh, the net spend's only 50 million or something like that. Okay, but if we sell 250 million quid's worth of players, that comes into the mix as well. But all this is now on the table because people need to be clear. It's not just all speculating, running away with it and all this. The skipper's mentioned it. The head coach has mentioned it. The big journalist has mentioned it. Everyone is using these types of phrases. So before everyone jumps on you're just going to say things like war chest or massive spend and all this, we're just commenting on what is already out there. And
with the very clear proviso you made of, if it doesn't happen, it will feel like we're being gaslit again. Yeah. So there is very much all of that into the pardon me. Hopefully you couldn't hear that. I'm not sure if you could or not.
That'll be Michael Edwards saying don't mention massive spend, no doubt as well.
It's Big Mick Edwards saying, Trev, come on lads, drive away from this topic. They're getting antsy in the comments. I wanted to just put a bit of context on this for people. Because it's always wild to me when we start talking about this concept of the big summer. It's always wild to me how people just have this, like, it was apparent that people thought, well, Luis Diaz is not going anywhere or Darwin Núñez is not going anywhere. But like, what are you watching? What have you not been paying attention? So what I wanted to do is just walk through the squad really quick with you. So we look at the goalkeepers. Alisson Becker, you and I both fear something possible there because we've got obviously the big guy coming through. But this week, there was stories about how he wouldn't mind staying on for another year because the suggestion was that Alisson wasn't going anywhere for next season. This is all good. But Caoimhín Kelleher, straight up, is a guy who's up for sale. Defenders, Joe Gomez. I don't see any way that Joe stays around. I'd love him to, but I'm thinking if they're assessing the guy in terms of his availability and they're being ruthless, I don't see Joe staying. No. I hope he does, and I hope he plays loads of games for Liverpool because I really like him. Ibu Konate, there is a contract issue. Kostas Tsimikas will be starting to think, what's the point of this when he has a situation like he had on Sunday? Andy Robertson won't go anywhere until he's told that he'll be second choice. So who knows if that will happen. But Trent Alexander-Arnold is likely on his bike for free. Gerald Kwanzaa was one of the names you mentioned that Ornstein said. We've got good news around the Bradley contract, so that's something. Wataru Endo, beloved by Liverpool fans, but not beloved by the manager, has a tiny role that he gets played in on a semi-regular basis, and I don't know how happy he would be to continue in that next season. So Bosley, McAllister, Jones, and Gravenberch, they're the chosen ones. They're the four that we operate the three out of. Harvey Elliott's up for grabs, apparently, because he doesn't play. Tyler Morton's up for grabs.
Yeah.
Luis Diaz is up for grabs. Darwin Núñez is up for grabs. The only player signed on this manager's watch that makes it not just exclusively Jurgen Klopp's squad is Fede Chiesa. He's got to be up for grabs because he doesn't play. And Diogo Jota is the guy who I think most people will say, oh, you just hold on to Jota. Fair enough. I get that. Yeah. And I'm very fond of all of these guys, but I also know how we operate. And if there's money to be made from him and we sign someone who's got the right numbers. So Dave, it amounts to a huge amount of potential activity. That's where the big thing comes from. And, I don't think there's anything I've said there that's completely unreasonable, is there?
No, I think there'll be a few comments, like I'll put it on the screen there saying Remster, the Kwanzaa stuff is honestly crazy to me. I get people will like players or they'll have the favourites or think they're a good player. But just take Kwanzaa as that example. I think it's very fair to mention it because Ornstein's name checked him. And also there was an article a couple of weeks ago in the Times that said Newcastle were looking at Jarell Kwanzaa and Liverpool will sell for the right money. It was quite clear. There was prices and everything quoted. And if you're in any doubts of that name at all, how often has Jarell Kwanzaa played this summer or this season? Sorry, just not, has he? He's clearly not particularly fancied by Arne Slot. I mean, he's only coming on now at emergency right back. Emergency right back. That's it. And in all honesty, you probably wonder if he hadn't have taken Curtis Jones off and made that switch, if he would have gone, like Fulham a little bit in the Everton game. So there's just a lot of players that is quite clear Arne Slot doesn't fancy and links to that. There's no one that you mentioned there that I would go, hold on, they're staying, whatever. I just think we've got to start looking at this a bit differently. This is not, it sounds horrible to say, but this is not the Jurgen Klopp era where everyone's in it together. There's a huge reluctance for anyone to depart almost and change it. I think it's looked at a bit differently. And honestly, all those names that you mentioned, I'm not saying we're going to sell the whole squad, people, but all those names you mentioned, Trev, it would not surprise me one bit if any of them moved on. Not at all.
And again, I don't know what version of reality you're in if you are going, oh no, that could never happen. Primarily just, again, the simple thing that this is a new guy and we've had almost a season's worth of tensions to build up and fellas to... Jan always says, the lads who weren't in the first team, they used to, in training, they were referred to as the sour grapes, the guys who were grumbling and mumbling about everything. I'm not in the first year, and again, back then it was the first 11 or first 12 rather. Yeah. So it was a smaller little squad you could even be part of. And, you don't tell me that's not building up with some of these guys who are not getting a chance. If you're Harvey Elliott, if you're Fede Chiesa, you've got to be sick at the lack of opportunities. But we'll move along now to the Premier League in general. We'll start, though, with one little fun Liverpool connection, because over at City, they have Gundogan, who they took back, and they've got KDB, who is on his way out. And they're both looking like they've got uncertain futures at City, at least. And you've all seen, if you're watching this or listening to this, the very fun links with Kevin De Bruyne in a mock-up Liverpool shirt. And again, whereas I love it, I don't think anyone has really thought that through, because Kev's going to want big old money, and we ain't going to pay a guy Kev's age big old money for a couple of years or a year. So probably not, but fun. Talk to us about De Bruyne and Gundogan and City.
Yeah, it's interesting because people were like, he said what he said. He did the interview, and people were like, no, there's no way he will be considered a move to the Premier League. It's going to be into Miami, abroad, and all this. So what I thought I'd do just for this one, people, it's only about 40 seconds, but let's listen to it from the horse's mouth, literally. Just play this, just a 30, 40-second snippet of this. KDB after the game.
Whatever project is available, I'm willing to listen. I love football. I love to play football. And if a nice project comes and my family is also good with that, then we're able to make a decision.
Last question I got to ask you, because you're saying that exciting projects. I follow you in Germany. I followed you for many years. So will that say that England is not over yet?
No, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. It could be not.
That was not a City's my only club. I love City at my heart. I couldn't consider playing for another team, was it? There was a long pause, and it's like, you tell Newcastle would pay me a lot. Would Liverpool give me a contract? I was weighing it up in his head a little bit there, but he didn't rule it out. So you've got to keep that in mind. There's a bit of uncertainty of, could Kevin De Bruyne stay on these shores? That's a possibility to consider. The other veteran midfielder, like you looked at, and I thought this was funny because you remember Pep had talked about Matheus Nunes and said he's not clever enough to be a midfielder, so that's why we're looking at him at right back. It was the other night, Trev, he talked about it, and Ilkay Gundogan has literally hit enough appearances to trigger a one-year extension. Now, I mean, he was an unbelievable player back in the day, wasn't he? Annoyingly at our detriment, because he scored a lot of goals in the title run-ins quite often. But he's a shadow of that player now. I think he's 36, set to be 37. And his lack of legs in midfield has been one of the things they looked at. Honestly, he was talking about this in the press conference. He genuinely looked depressed, Pep, that Ilkay Gundogan has triggered a year extension. He was kind of like, yeah, we can't get rid of him now, unfortunately, on a contractual basis. So one midfielder might stay in the Premier League. One isn't smart enough to play in midfield. And one, the manager looks depressed that he is staying around for another year. So, yeah, it'll be an interesting dressing room, I suspect, at Manchester City right now.
I just love the way Guardiola can't hide his feelings about us. That story, was it last show or the show before, about Mateus Nunes? That's just hilarious. Just hilarious. And you put that on the back. Like, what's that guy going to do except be talking to his agent and get me out of here? And you put that on the back of De Bruyne and Gundogan. And yeah, they have a big rebuild. We're not the only ones who have a potential big summer ahead. That's interesting. KDB, we know he didn't he really consider the Saudi thing at one point? Weren't we given to believe that he was very actively considering it, and that the only reason it fell through was the huge money that they had originally touted as an offer? Then they rolled back on that. Isn't that right? Am I misremembering?
No, you're absolutely right. There was a real consideration, but the mix of see it out at City, and there was a bit of like, what are they going to offer him? So you do wonder how big the truck they drive up to his house will be this summer, but you can't rule it out, because he had 1 foot there last time, so they're definitely in the mix. And a few people mentioned there that this is the strangest thing ever. In America, clubs can register legends on their transfer sheets, even though they don't play for them. Like Inter Miami can say, in a few years, we have a dream aspiration to sign like Lionel Messi, Kevin De Bruyne. So that's what they did. You can almost like put yourself at the front of the queue. Doesn't mean they have to go, but you get first dibs on talking to them. So Inter Miami wrote down Kevin De Bruyne's name about 3 years ago. So if he is to go to America, they get first shot at him, or whatever you call it. What an insane way. I love it. Imagine if we could just do that. Can you imagine, like, Liverpool would have 4 names, like Chelsea, Todd Bowley, 657 names we've got written down here. Like, you just imagine if you could write the names down for the future. But that's the way it works in America. So people have mentioned it. If it is America, Inter Miami get first shot.
Oh, God bless them. It's like little teenage girls writing down the names of boys they like. Remarkable stuff. To get back to our previously scheduled business, let's talk a little bit about Bournemouth, a very interesting club. I know recently you were saying, let's just sign Bournemouth, basically, because there's so many of their players that we would like. Kirkes is the obvious one we haven't mentioned in this show yet, but it's the biggest link that we've had. Huijsen's the one we've mentioned this week. Semenyo was a previous one. What else is going on around Bournemouth in terms of ins and outs that you've heard?
Yeah, it's a funny one, because I want to be respectful that they're not a huge club in terms of their fan base, their span, their reputation, the ground and all that, but they really are punching above their weight, and they have been almost the club that a lot of people have been casting admiring glances, you say it, at their players, like on the screen there for the ball carries. Look at those. I mean, Semenyo, Zabayani, Kluivert been sensational this season. Kirkes, Huijsen. So there's that. There's a lot of Premier League teams with like a lot of Bournemouth players. So doing a bit of digging on this and actually getting a bit from Bournemouth journos and people who cover them I've not really spoken to before. Their side, and it's always important to balance both sides, is that Bournemouth are breathing. No. Not all of these are going, by the way. You can't just strip our squad bare. It's not like a closing down sale that, yes, the likes of Huijsen, release clause, can't stop it. Yes, Kirkes, they've already made provisions because that's Soler, the left back's coming, haven't they? They expect Kirkes to depart. But all these people as well thinking, oh, I'll have a Zabayani or I'll have a Semenyo and all this. No, Bournemouth are being really clear. Like, we've got our own aspirations. We've got Iraola, who's doing well and is liked by a lot of other clubs as well. To keep him happy, we're not just going to sell 6, are they, and go again. And they've got an ambitious ownership group who've got a multi-club model as well. So it's just important to say that. A lot of noise coming from the Bournemouth camp is, yeah, you may have admiring glances, but hands off for most of these.
I think that's interesting because honestly, why wouldn't they have, a sort of a stay away from our club kind of attitude? Because they seem to have ambition. They have one of these promising young managers you mentioned, Iraola. But what worries me about it for them, if I'm to think of it from a Bournemouth perspective, is that you just can't beat City Hall. You can't fight City Hall. And I just mean, if the bigger important guys come sniffing around, inevitably it unsettles. And once they're unsettled, the move is inevitable. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch them and to watch what we do with them. Several people, of course, pointing out the thing that we've mentioned a million times about Richard Hughes' links there, but we'll see what, if anything, comes of that. And finally, then, you've mentioned already today a couple of times Newcastle. They've come into the conversation. We saw the links for Cunha, but apparently as well they're sniffing around Ekitike as well. And I swear to God, Dave, I haven't even looked at this sentence. I'm blurring my eyes so I don't look at the sentence because I don't want to say what you said. But sorry, I just flicked back to the screen. I can see that was the sentence I was going to say. Anthony Gordon rumors back again. So talk us through.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, you'd put good money on Newcastle getting one of those Champions League spots. So we'll have to see. Yes, they've had a few PSR issues, but if you get the Champions League bundle, that helps a lot of things, doesn't it, really, in terms of finance and keeping Isak and all that. Exactly as you said, Cunha, that was well known. There's a lot reporting that. They've talked to his agent, the same agent as Bruno Guimaraes, the same agency. So that's great. At the same time, Ekitike now mentioned as well, but this one was just a left field. And this is not just a left field in terms of, like, without being disrespectful, a random person's made it up. This was David Ornstein saying to CBS, Arsenal admire Anthony Gordon. David Ornstein said this. It's a real, we all know who David Ornstein is in that way. Yes, we've talked about them looking at Nico Williams. That's a real target there. And yes, as people are saying, he has just signed a contract. Absolutely. Yes, we were in for him this summer. But this is David Ornstein saying that Arsenal really like Anthony Gordon. And you do just wonder, Newcastle have got plans, but that PSR FFP is just that little sort of needle in the foot, isn't it, a little bit for them? How are they going to solve that? So it is an interesting one. But for people thinking, this has just come from nowhere, David Ornstein said this on CBS. So there's got to be some weight to it.
Yeah, and whether or not, and again, just I'm not going to commit you to this, because part of the best part of what you get to do is you talk to so many people and you've got good relationships with people. And so I'll be the one who'll go out here on the limb and say that, we had built up Ornstein and Joyce previously to these almost infallible, when speaking ex cathedra types, cannot be wrong. They have the bestest information, and on a few occasions we've been led right down the garden path. And now I'm not saying that those guys did that deliberately. Of course, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is there were occasions when they were badly out of the loop, it would appear. So yeah, of course, it seems to have some heft. It has added heft if it's those guys. But you always have to be wary and be prepared that things may not necessarily go that way. Europe-wise, then, just for the last few minutes, and I'm aware that we have 5 or 6 left for the hour. We'll try and keep it to the hour. Really interesting one at the top, PSG related. We've looked at PSG. We've looked at them destroy us, pull us apart in that first leg. And yet somehow we mugged them and got away from Paris with a win. Now, I think the one that sticks in everyone's craw is Kvicha Kvaratskhelia, because everyone can see how good that guy is, and how close we could have been. And it feels like that's one of the ones that really gets the FSG out boys waving their flags, because you think, okay, it was big money, but commit that big money and you've got a big talent who could win you things. But they have Downey, they have Barcola, they have so many incredible, talented footballers, and Dembele, obviously. But what's going on with them at the moment in terms of ins and outs? And is there, if you were to give me my druthers here, I'd say go put a big sort of sack over Downey, throw him into the back of the Mercedes Vito, and drive him to Liverpool, because I just love to see that kid play for us. But what's going on there? And again, don't worry about it from a Liverpool point of view, but in general, there is news about PSG, and PSG are hot stuff at the moment. So what's the story?
Yeah, PSG just love wingers, don't they? As you mentioned there, like Downey, Kvicha, Barcola, and even Dembele's been moved into the middle, but can play wide on occasions, like he's done at the same time. The big thing that's come out, as a lot of people have mentioned this, that Barcola hasn't extended his contract yet because he wants to wait till the end of the season. And naturally, when Kvicha came in, people were like, well, they're not buying Kvicha to sit on the bench, so where's the knock-on effect going to be? And it did feel like Barcola would be the one to drop out. So there's that in the mix a little bit. Now, Trev, when you've got Downey, Kvicha, Barcola, as you mentioned, and Dembele that can play wide, what do? They're almost like the French Chelsea. They're going for another winger. They are genuinely going for another winger. And I'm probably butchering this name because he's at Monaco, but I think it's Akilush it's pronounced. So a speedster at Monaco. PSG are well in for this one. So then there'd be a fifth winger in the mix, wouldn't there? So now you're thinking, like, you can't play them all. How's this going to work? And naturally, Barcola already seems to have been affected a little bit by Kvicha coming in. Well, if they're buying this kid as well, you do start to have a few question marks about the pecking order, don't you? Now, I'm not saying I know this, but Liverpool have liked Barcola for a long time. And the kid is absolutely insanely rapid, beyond belief. He's my idea of a left winger. He really is. So that's a manifestation from me. But in terms of, like you said, just for what's known, PSG have already got 4, are looking to buy another winger, and Barcola is just delaying these contract talks just to see what happens. Now, wouldn't surprise me because it's Jorge Mendes and he's already got 6 players at PSG. If there's a big fat renewal coming Bradley's way, just to keep him happy. But it is one just to keep an eye on, definitely.
Yeah, love it. I think it's quite heartening to see how good that side looked in the game they've played after us.
Yeah.
It does feel a little bit like we were probably beaten by the eventual champions. That's what it feels like to me. And so whether or not they'll allow themselves to be broken up is another thing altogether. Like you said, if they all they have to do is flex their financial muscle, but worth watching. Bayern is the next story we want to go to, our second last story of the day, because we saw Tommy Muller, being sacrificed on the altar because he's probably a very high earner and not playing enough minutes. So we saw him on the way out, and I don't know if you saw, Dave, the interview that he did post match with the lads on the side of the pitch, and it was really good. And he basically turned the tables on the interviewer and said, what you could be you next. Basically, I thought it was very funny and just shows the character of that guy. He just does seem to be a good lad, but he's not alone. It seems like there's another one of their squad stalwarts who might be on his way out as well.
Yeah, Tommy Muller has to go to facilitate the wage increases for Kimmich, Neuer, Musiala and all those. And it looks like someone else who, probably the right word because it's Bayern to use, is sacrificed, is Kingsley Coman. Now, Arsenal have been linked with him, but anyone who knows Kingsley Coman's injury record, it is absolutely horrendous, Trev. And we've mentioned him before as he's been light. I do get the feel, I just can't get around this, that he ends up one of two places, because it's a bit of a foolish move, really, I'd say, for Premier League clubs. So he either ends up at Saudi for the bag, and a big bag it will be, you know, and then it's one of those and it's a big name, or, you know, one of those that Tottenham buy, you know, just one of those random players that Tottenham spend silly money on. You're like, why are you doing that? But it's a Tottenham signing, and you think that. I could see it. But, yeah, for Bayern, this is a case of, well, we've done the wage increases. These are the 5 we want to keep. So you two, I'm afraid, are going to have to jump in the volcano and be sacrificed.
Do you think Kingsley will be joined by Tommy taking the Saudi bag? Because you could see Muller being one that people would be queuing up for over that part of the world as well.
Do you know what? I had vision. I thought about this. What I could imagine is Coman going to Saudi and having that. Tommy Muller going to America or someone like that, and just walking around, you know, with his selfie stick, just filming it all and training and stuff like that, and just being one of those characters, or having a little TV show like The Mullers in Miami or something like that. That's what I envisage for Tommy Muller, and just being happy in his later life.
I can see that too. And just to finish us off then and bring us back in the direction of the Premier League, there is a talent at Marseille who's being linked heavily to, I think, 2 Premier League clubs.
Yeah, well liked. Marseille are a bit of a mess, aren't they? De Zerbi, the former Brighton boss, sort of Marseille fans fight with everyone in charge, but he's fighting with them now. It feels like his days are numbered. One of their starlets, Luis Enrique, Brazilian left winger, a lot of interest on the continent. But if you look at the clubs linked, it's that type of player who Forest chasing the Champions League, Newcastle hoping to get in the Champions League, could be a really good signing. Now, if I wanted to put 2 and 2 together and get 29, I'd be like, okay, Newcastle are interested in a left winger as Anthony Gordon is linked with an exit and all those types of things. But we might just be fishing randomly there. But Luis Enrique is liked, as a few reports are going round, by a number of Premier League clubs chasing the Champions League.
Now, it's probably just as well as we just clock over the hour that we wrap up, because the tempers are frayed in the comments section. And you're just lucky, lads, that I don't have any control over anything to do with that today. Just my system reset before. So I'm actually just here as a guest in terms of having any editorial input. But probably just as well we wrap it up before things get too fraught there amongst the lads in the chats. But we should wrap it up, Dave. And, you know, overall, it feels to me like there's a lot of hope for the summer come in terms of change, and in terms of, you know, the potential for this show to be very relevant to people because of that change. That's kind of where I'm landing with it. We all only have one thing in our mind now. We need the guys that we have to do that thing. And then can you imagine what the state of this show is going to be like if and when the Reds get the job done in the next couple of weeks? Because there will still be some weeks left in the season, and we'll be looking at that early window, Dave, and things are going to go bananas. You know they are.
It sounds crazy to even say this. Liverpool can win the Premier League by the 20th of April. That's a fact. That can happen. If Ipswich beat Arsenal and we beat Leicester, we win the Premier League like a couple of weeks before the end of April. So, yeah, and even you expect it the week after, like you say, but transfer window 1 on June the 1st is ramping up, isn't it? It just feels like everything's heading towards that. There's release clauses, people being targeted. You're starting to get an idea. There's contracts to be sorted, numerous contracts to be sorted, exit, incomings. It just feels like the exact opposite of last summer. Let's just hope, like we said, to use that phrase again, please let's pray we're not being gaslit again.
Well, just in terms of our club, that's the kind of point I was making, just exclusively from a Liverpool perspective. When, let's just go with that, the job gets done, all bets are off. Nobody has to pretend anymore. Nobody has to keep up a united front in terms of press in terms of the things that they're saying in interviews. And you could be looking at some lads who are just good lads and don't want to let the side down and aren't saying what they're thinking at the moment. The wheels could come right off with some of those guys. It's really interesting. It's going to be a really interesting period. I hope we retain as many of these good lads as possible. I hope we get a load of good lads in also, because I want the best of both worlds. And if we do get that, or if we don't get that, regardless, you will have Dave and I to walk you through it. So thanks to Dave again for collecting all the stories he does on a regular basis. They're coming thick and fast, which is why the shows are coming thick and fast. We wouldn't be doing them if we didn't have this, information being put out there that we'd like to pass on to you. So like I said before, don't shoot the messenger. Enjoy it for what it's worth. And we'll be back with you very soon.